very warm welcome to all of you, or so many of you, for this second CPD of 2013. It's really very encouraging to see this time. The strength is more than any seminar that we have had in last so many years. Maybe Mr. our learned speaker, Mr. Shah, Nawaz magic is working, or what is the thing? Thank you so much to all of you for attending the CPD. Before we really go to the CPD, the main topic, I will introduce our learned speaker. So, I would like to welcome today not only our board members and all of you. I am seeing some new, Mr. Philip, who is president of ACI and all. And welcome to you also, Mr. Philip.
Thank you.
Before we go to the topic of the CPD, like few announcements or few news, a little bit news about IAQS that we need to share with all of you. Maybe through emails you would have known those things, but let us share that. One thing, the first thing is that in Doha, the member council is being established there, and matrix classes, which are Ramesh is taking a good initiative to start matrix classes there. So those are going to start somewhere end of this month or beginning of March. So that is a big achievement, that Ramesh being here and he's having conducting matrix classes in Doha. Please give a big round of applause to him. Then another achievement for today's session is going to be that some of the MIQS memberships are going to be formalized, and some of the members may be given this cards for MIQS. For that also some of the members like Paul and Sajid and Ramesh and Rekha, they have all really worked hard to create those first batch of membership cards. So a big thank you to all of them as well. And another news is this magazine. For 2013, there is a plan to publish an annual magazine, which will be an annual feature thereafter. So for magazine, I think you might have received the mail from our member council member Sini, asking for a competition for the cover page. So we are expecting your input on that. These were the few things which we need to share with you. Now, before I introduce the speaker for today, just like because the topic is liquidated damages, a UAE perspective. So in that context, like liquidated damages, as we all know that it is a real key issue, a real issue that all of us we have been facing in our day-to-day project. So now that's why we thought that to deal with such a serious matter which is affecting the personal life of so many people, we need to talk about or need to know a little bit more about the liquidated damages. So in that context, the most suitable person that we thought was Mr. Shah Nawaz. Now, Mr. Shah Nawaz, he is a chartered accountant by profession, and then the question came that how if CA can be most suitable candidate for talking on liquidated damages. That's why we had to ask him credentials that please justify your credentials that you are. Then his credentials, which in a very brief, of course, are very big, but we have just briefed it. Mr. Shah Nawaz is the Regional Operational Director for the Engineering Systems Group of Johnson's Control International for the Middle East. He qualified as a Chartered Accountant in 1987, and after a short stint in BHL Bangalore, he moved to Dubai in 1995. After holding the regular finance positions, he shifted to operation in 2006. Now he introduces himself as a reformed accountant. That is, he doesn't want to make any offense to the accounting profession, but he got himself a business operations post-qualification certification to stop this credentials which we are questioning now. Now, overseeing the projects, project management, project development, warranty administration, contracts and commercial functions of the business, he is overseeing all these functions now. And his past profile also includes managing the order to cash value chain, logistics, warehouse operations, etc. He has presented more papers in logistics and customer service seminar than in finance related area, which makes him the most learned and esteemed speaker to talk on this liquidated damages. He often finds himself as a part of the meetings in which there is more discussion about engineering problems than operational issues, and certainly where there is much less talk about finance, accounting or numbers. He is the proud recipient of Leadership Award for Johnson Control Middle East in 2011 and has graduated from the Leadership Edge program in 2012. Please join hands in welcoming Mr. Shah Nawaz, such a learned
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. After a long day at work, I don't want to talk about damages, whether liquidated or not, but then I'll try to make it as light as possible. Paul was talking about marriage and liquidated damages. I don't know whether diamonds or damages which will be more expensive, probably liquidated damages. So we'll try to see how the liquidated damages and the problems associated with it. Whenever I try to start talking about a subject like this, I'd like to go into the etymology of the phrase itself, liquidated damages. What does it mean? It helps us in developing the origin and the evolution of the term before we go into the details of the law associated with LD. What does liquidated mean? Liquidated is to clear up, to eliminate, even assassinate. Even that is called liquidated. Liquidate. Damages is to wound, to mutilate, and so on and so forth. So together, liquidated damages is a pretty violent term, and probably that's one of the reasons why site meetings often tend to be so unpleasant. Perhaps liquidated damages. We're talking about assassinations and mutilations. Now, liquidate also means to settle, to pay off a debt, to clear an obligation. And damages can also mean impairment. What it actually means in the term, in the context of liquidated damages that we are talking about today, is basically to make good or to compensate for an injury that has been inflicted upon one party by another party, usually by the contractor on the employer, or by the subcontractor on the contractor. Liquidate is an adjective in the sense that you are trying to clear off a debt that could happen in the future. It is also, you will see that it is liquidated damages, which means that it is in the past tense. In the past tense, even when you are entering into the contract, which is actually the principle of ex ante. It's a Latin terminology which means that it is before the event. Which means that even when during the formation of the contract, you're talking about a liquidated damage. It means you're anticipating a problem that could come in the contractual relationship, and you're trying to set down a set of rules which will say that if the damages occur, how are you going to set right or clear the damage that could occur because of that? It's generally a subject of despair and gloom, in the sense that, okay, while forming the contract, while lawyering the contract, negotiating it, yes, we talk about liquidated damages, how the clause should be worded, and so on and so forth. But when we are actually coming to the execution phase of the contract, and let us say that now we are at the phase where delays have occurred, we have the contractor and the subcontractor, or the employer and the contractor are sitting together across the table and talking about liquidated damages. You can rest assured that the contractual relationship is already under stress. It's not hunky-dory between the contracting parties, because now we are talking about delays and penalties. So in that sense, it is very, very important that we foresee that. You plan for the worst, and while drafting the contract, make sure that should such a scenario arise, what would be our recourse, whether you're talking it from the perspective of the contractor or from the employer. Now, it is a prevalent practice in construction contracting, there's no doubt about it. All jurisdictions, all legal and contractual jurisdictions talk about liquidated damages in one form or the other. And UAE law, of course, affirms it, it recognizes it, but in a different way that is at variance with what you would otherwise experienced under a common law jurisdiction. We'll come to that later. FIDIC, of course, talks about it. Funnily enough, the 99 version talked about delay damages rather than liquidated damages. But however, liquidated damages need not necessarily arise only in the course of delays. It can happen even otherwise. For example, a contractor is setting up a power plant and the promised fuel efficiency is not being achieved. In that case also liquidated damages can arise. Let's say in my industry, the industry in which I come from, HVAC, it could be the case where we are not able to deliver the promised refrigeration tanks. So that could arise in a liquidated damage. And this is very, very often, whether it is in the Middle East or otherwise, interchangeably used with the term delay penalty. Now let's talk about penalty. The three key words are breach, stipulated, and in terrorem. Breach and stipulated are pretty straightforward. There's a breach of contract by one party against the other. So hence there is a damage, you need to clear it off. What is this in terrorem? Another violent word. In terrorem means by fear, as a threat, as a deterrent. What it means is that, let's talk about a will. A will is really not a contract, but a will of bequeathment from one person to, let's say, his relatives. You can build in an in terrorem clause which says that if the beneficiary challenges the will, then the beneficiary is not entitled to the proceeds or whatever is the legacy that comes out of the will. Now, it works every time because then the beneficiary, if he challenges it in a court of law, then he doesn't get anything. So you would rather get something rather than nothing. In a will it would operate, but since it is used as a terrorizing mechanism, it's termed as a penalty. Anything that's a penalty under common law is not enforceable. Again, I'm putting it under quotes, under common law. Under UAE law, again, it works differently. So unless the party which is seeking to enforce this penalty is a constitutional authority, is a court or a police department or such legislative, constitutionally authorized entity, a penalty by contract cannot be enforced. So let us call it something else. Delay penalty. Delay penalty is very often the alternative word that is used for liquidated damages. Now, a delay penalty is not even a legal word. It's not a legally recognized word. It doesn't have a definition under law. A delay penalty is more, it's actually a sporting term. It's used in ice hockey and cricket. Cricket, we know. If the bowling team does not complete the allocated number of overs in a day, it gets the captain gets a penalty. So that's a delay penalty. But if it is used as a penalty, as a threat, as a deterrent, then it cannot be enforced. It can be included in a contract and used as an enforceable clause if it is termed as a liquidated damage. Now, why is it so? Why is that a court would recognize something of the same concept but called by a different name? There's a reason to that. Now, there is something called the principle of equity, which means to say that the contracting parties needs to act in a fair and reasonable manner. Just because the employer is a customer and the contractor is down in the food chain, it doesn't mean that the employer can enforce any kind of contract to all the people downwards in the downstream relationship. Now, the principle of equity acts in various circumstances. It could be tenant versus landlord. It could be employer and employee in a normal job context, or what are the other similar, I don't know, husband and wife. I don't know who has got the upper hand, but those are the different kinds of relationships that you can have. But a court of law, or the legislative authority, whoever is responsible, would step in if there's no equity there. So the whole principle of LD arose out of the unequal relationship that is preemptive in any contractual relationship. It is true that the customer, because he's got the leverage to negotiate, because he has got the order to give away to the customer, to the contractor, he has got the upper hand. But that doesn't mean that he can incorporate clauses that would be detrimental to the general principle of equity. However, when a contractor takes a job, takes a project, undertakes to perform certain contractual obligations, he's got an implicit responsibility to see that he performs the contract according to the requirements. That's the reason why he's getting paid. This is the reason why. So, you take the case of an employer-employee relationship, especially in the case of organized labor. For example, let's take the case of India. You have organized labor, trade unions, powerful trade unions. When in the 19th century or the early 20th century, when the employer had the upper hand, he started exploiting them as slave laborers, as laborers, as employees. Now, the pendulum was on the other side, where the employer had all the strength, the financial strength, the legal strength, and also the contractual strength. And the employee was the abused person. But then, when it became an organized labor, the employees became so strong that they could go on strike, get into labor disputes, and paralyze the entire economy. That is the other end of the pendulum. Just like that, the delay penalty was when the courts saw that the delay penalty can be abused by the employer, but if the delay penalty is not available as a recourse to the employer, then it swung to the other side, where the erstwhile exploited party, who is perhaps a contractor, reneged on its contractual obligations in such a way that it became a detriment to the so-called exploiter. So, in the sense that there is now a compulsion that you have to recognize this fact that a contractor, by entering into that contract, has got a responsibility to perform certain obligations within a given time, within certain given parameters, which he accepts in consideration for the money, the contractual value that he accepts. At the end of the day, the pendulum keeps swinging on both sides, but at the end of the day, the balance is that whether we are working as a contractor, as a subcontractor, or as an employer, it is good to have an ND clause in the contract. From an employer's perspective, that is the person who is awarding the contract, from his perspective, he doesn't have to prove that a loss actually happened. Now, this is something that we will go into detail by way of a case law later in the presentation. But a liquidated damages, the ex ante principle, I'd like to get deeper into that. The ex ante principle says that you don't have to demonstrate that the other party has actually incurred actual losses. It could be loss of revenues, it could be loss of days, it could be any kind of damages, but it is not necessary to prove that. It is an anticipated reasonable estimate of the losses that might be incurred by the other party. So that is why the ex ante principle is important, in the sense that we are not talking about a post facto position, but we are talking about an estimate that is happening during the formation of the contract itself, even during the time that two parties are sitting together to negotiate the contract. From a contractor's perspective, it is the added certainty that it is going to be defined in such and such a way. There is not going to be a future argument when the loss actually happens, how the employer is calculating the loss, what is his actual damage. It is not that way. We will say 0.5% per day, then that is a 0.5%. He can even build it into the costing of the project in such a way that there is no uncertainty, basically. Over a period of years, especially when you take into account the common law, whether it is in Europe, India, or the North American context, over a period of years, probably about 5 or 6 decades, 3 important guidelines have been kind of established to prove or to define what is in liquidated damages. The key word is reasonable. When we say that it's a 0.5% per day of delay, then it needs to be a reasonable estimate. But again, reasonable is not an absolute. Reasonable is not, again, not a legal word. What is reasonable needs to be taken in the context of the whole narrative of the contract. What is the employer's nature of business? Maybe it's a nuclear plant, maybe it's an airline, maybe it's a public utility, or what is the role of the contractor in that particular project? If the contractor is providing the main equipment in that entire project, yes, it is of critical nature. It comes in the critical part of the entire project program. Any delay that is caused by him will cause delays to the entire project. But let us say while building a facility in Dubai, if the contractor is merely acting as the finishing agent, he's setting up the lawn for the facility, maybe then that 0.5% is not a reasonable estimate. So reasonable estimate needs to be taken in the context of the particular project and in the context of the relationship between the two parties. It's again a pre-estimate, it is not a post-facto loss. It should be incapable or it should be very difficult of accurate estimation. Now, if it could be estimated that the employer, for example, because of the delay by a certain contractor, will incur so many dollars per day, then it does not qualify as a liquidated damage. Then you are defining that this is part of the contract. You would rather put it as a part of the contract. But to qualify as a liquidated damage, the estimation cannot be ascertained, cannot be determined with any reasonable sort of accuracy. Intention of the parties. This is again cause for huge arguments when it comes into a court of law. Because an intention of the party, how does a court of law sit in judgment deciding what was the intention of the party when the contract was being formed? It is very difficult because when two parties are sitting across the table negotiating a contract, they are more interested in, the employer is interested in making sure that there is a contractual enforceability on how the subcontractor will perform, and from a subcontractor point of view, if he performs, how is he going to get paid? That is all their intentions are. But in the case of liquidated damages, the intention of the parties is that where it plays an important role is that it should not be that it is construed as a penalty. The contractor is not using this tool as a penalty to enforce performance by the subcontractor. But again, especially in the West, this intention of the parties is now being ignored as a third precept of the LD concept, because it's so difficult to ascertain what was the intention at that point in time. Now let's come into UAE law. 392 of the UAE Civil Code is a place where this is being discussed. Starting from 280 onwards, it talks about the civil code talks about various kinds of damages, various kinds of losses that can happen in a civil relationship between a tenant and a landlord, between a husband and wife, whatever. It talks about various things. But 392 talks about a commercial relationship where you have it could give a rise to liquidated damages. First of all, the UAE law recognizes that may fix a compensation in advance by providing for that as an express provision in the contract. So in advance, which means it is ex ante, the ex ante principle has been taken into account. But what is most surprising is the second part of this particular clause. The court may, on the application of either party, adjust the agreed amount of compensation. This happens nowhere else. Not in any of the developed markets does this happen. Which means that the court can step in and say that either the 0.5% that I was talking about is too high or too less. Normally, in any common law jurisdiction, you will find that a court will not sit in judgment between, and try to ascertain the merits or demerits of a case, and say that this is too onerous on one party and too beneficial to the other party. Normally, they don't allow that. It's not considered under any common law. UAE law is an exception, and perhaps that's probably also the case in other Middle East countries. And my assumption is that it is an evolved concept, especially because most of the developments that happen here are owned by the locals. So that has got a certain protective legislation that kind of tries to seek to protect the interest of the locals. Now, if you compare this with what I have said so far about the common law precepts of liquidated damages, you will see that this can act as a penalty. Why penalty is disrecognized in the Western law is that because only a constitutional authority can levy penalty. But here it says that if it results, if the default of one party results in a loss to another party, then the aggrieved party can claim losses against the other, can claim damages against the other party. Now, again, in most of the other areas of civil code in the UAE, you will find that there is no punitive aspect to it. Let us say one person posts a blog in the Facebook dishonoring or defaming another party, a case of libel. In any other jurisdiction, a case of libel has got a punitive damage. The court of law will levy a punitive damage, but that doesn't normally happen in the UAE law, because here it says that what is the actual damage that has been suffered. Yes, there is a price for dishonor, but the court decides on that. The court decides what, and it's usually much less than the punitive damages that you might experience in the North American courts. So the concept of punitiveness is absent or is less significant in the UAE courts. However, liquidated damages, it goes beyond the Western courts and tries to apply liquidated damages even if it is called a penalty in the contract. I don't know whether I'm making it clear. If there are any questions, please let me know. I just want to take a case law. It's 138/94. Obviously means it was a case that came into the Court of Cassation for Dubai in 1994. It was a dispute between a contractor and a subcontractor who was supposed to supply some doors and windows and install them in a building. The subcontractor delayed. There was a penalty clause. It was called a penalty clause in the contract, and the contractor tried to deduct the penalty from the subcontractor's invoice. The subcontractor went to the court. Now, the two things happened. One is that the court recognized that there is a penalty, there is an enforceable penalty by the contractor on the subcontractor. Now, you will see that the word that is used in the civil code is tawidat. Now, that's an Arabic word which means actually compensation. It doesn't say it's penalty or it's liquidated damages. The kind of linguistic discrimination that we're trying to, or we would try to make in Western, in any court that is ruled by in any other Western jurisdiction, between penalty and liquidated damages, that is absent in the UAE law. Because of the meaning of the word is actually compensation, which means you're trying to set right an injury that has been caused by one party or the other party. Now, it went up to the Dubai Court of Cassation. There was a lower court which said that yes, the penalty has to be enforced. The subcontractor has to has to pay the damages. It went up to the Dubai Court of Cassation. The Dubai court said that yes, there is a penalty. However, they interfered in the quantum of damages that is applicable in this case. What they did was, they went back to the post facto case, that is the actual damages. They tried to ascertain what is the actual loss that has been incurred by the contractor because of this delay in the supply of doors and windows. So probably it went to an evaluator, and they arrived at a dollar amount which is enforceable on the contractor. Now there are two distinct differences between in this case. One is that the court specifically recognized penalty as an enforceable clause. The second one is that the court also asserted its right to interfere in the quantification of this penalty. And that is important. Normally that wouldn't appear in, that wouldn't happen in any other jurisdiction. These are some of the precepts that comes out of this case law and many other case laws. Now, in India or in the Western courts, when a Supreme Court makes a judgment and passes the adjudication, it is binding on the lower courts for a similar situation case. So all the parameters of the case, all the circumstances surrounding the case, if they are same, then they are bound to follow the Supreme Court's precedents. These normally happen where the law itself is not clear. But under the UAE civil law, there is no concept of binding precedents. A Dubai Court of Cassation judgment is not binding on the lower courts. However, having said that, it still has got a persuasive impact on the lower courts. Because they said so, because it's a higher court, it would still be considered, but it's not binding on them. That's an important difference that needs to be recognized here. There's no distinction between penalty and liquidated damages, like I said. Penalty in the Western courts or in the Indian courts is non-enforceable, is invalid, but here it is valid. No principle of ex ante, because in the case that we just saw, they stepped into the case after the event happened. They had the right to interfere and quantify the actual damages. So the principle of ex ante, that is the pre-estimated loss, that's not applicable. The court can interfere in the quantum of damages, and no reference to intention of parties. It doesn't matter whatsoever whether the parties were thinking of levying penalty or the liquidated damages. It doesn't matter. The intention is an absent precept as far as UAE courts are concerned. I want to contrast this with a case that happened. This is actually a 2011 case that happened in the USA. How two different courts are approaching the same concept. The case is called Lettermine versus Barron. The Lettermines were a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Lettermine. They paid an advance of 10% for a property that they wanted to buy from Barron for $385,000. Paid $38,500 as advance. This is what we would call a token money as an advance amount. And they set about trying to find out the balance financing for the purchase. They couldn't do it. They couldn't source the funds. So they said, I want the advance money back. But a key part of this purchase agreement was that there was this LD clause which said that the 10% down payment that is made will be forfeited by the seller of the property if the sale does not go through. But there was also another clause which said that, which gave the right to the owner of the property, that is Barron, for other kinds of remedies also. So if he is not able to sell it, then and if he is waiting for it, he can get paid interest if there is any delay, and so on and so forth. Now, all the lower courts, it came through two courts. They all said that Barron is right in claiming this 38,500 and forfeiting the advance. But it came up to the Supreme Court of Florida, and there they said that they went into all these different principles of liquidated damages. They said that, yes, 38,500 is a conscionable amount, is a reasonable amount, is the amount that Barron would otherwise suffer if the sale does not go through. However, they said that because Barron had other remedies in the contract, this LD clause is seen as a penalty, and hence Barron cannot enforce that penalty, and Barron lost the case. Now, the subtle difference between the UAE court and the Western court is that just because the LD had a flavor of being a penalty, it was not an enforceable clause. In the UAE, the same 138.94, it would have definitely passed. Barron would have got the compensation if it had happened in the UAE. So that principle, that essential difference is something to be noted. I'm also sure you know about the Boeing case, the Dreamliner, the batteries being potential fire hazards, and the delivery of these aircrafts to various airlines have been delayed enormously. We know that Japan Airlines, Air India, Sahara Airlines, there are, I think, including Emirates, I think, a lot of airlines which have been affected by this. This is a contemporary case, so I'm trying to throw a question to the audience in the sense that even Air India has been offered a package. We don't know what is the value of that package. The group of ministers has approved the package. Again, you know how it is. Now, if the aircraft delivery is delayed to an airline, obviously it means loss of revenue. And I'm sure in the purchase agreement, there is a percentage that has been mentioned as liquidated damages, 0.5% or whatever per day. We don't know the details. But does loss of revenue count as an enforceable right? Can that be called a real damage that needs to be that needs to be corrected by the Boeing company? What do you think? And why not? What else could be the liquidated damage for?
Whatever is said in the contract.
The 0.5%. Now, if you're not considering loss of revenue as a real loss that can occur to an airline, what else can be the actual loss that justify the 0.5%?
Extended warranty.
Extended warranties, why would it affect the airline? It affects Boeing.
No, airlines loss of
Reputation.
overheads of the airlines.
Yeah, there's a reputation part of it because they're not able to serve. Why would it affect these overheads?
The airlines would have set up their offices and would have staff and
Hired staff.
in anticipation, and then all this extends for another period.
So the whole question is, should the court sit in judgment on what all these damages could be? You know, that's where I'm coming to. A loss of revenue, whether it's a loss of revenue, it's a loss of reputation, whether loss of revenue, let's go into loss of revenue. In the case of Emirates Airlines, yes, loss of revenue can distill down into loss of dollars because they're making profits. In the case of Air India, would it apply? A loss of revenue is actually a loss of loss. It's actually, they would actually be saving money by delaying the, so all these things should the court sit in judgment on this. So this is the reason why LD is such a powerful class, because it takes a pre-estimated approximation of what could happen, and then you're telling the or the legislation is trying to tell the court that don't interfere in that. Don't interfere in the quantification if the parties signing the contract have entered into in good faith. So if it is, if the subcontractor has agreed to a 2% per day penalty, where 0.5% would have been sufficient, it's his bloody problem. unless it is proven that the subcontractor proves that he did it under duress, or there was no, consideration for that particular clause. I also want to go through a set of connected issues, related issues pertaining to liquidated damages. Exclusive remedy. We try to incorporate a clause, rather, an over-smart move that we try to do. What we try to call sole remedy is that if there is a liquidated damage clause, we accept it, 0.5% per week of delay, subject to a maximum of 10% of the contract value, so on and so forth. And then we try to incorporate an addendum to that clause, which says that the maximum amount of damage that is defined in this clause is a sole remedy available to the contractor, and the contractor does not have any right to levy any other penalties on the contract. Now, we do that even in the UAE contracts. In UAE, I doubt whether, if it comes to a court of law, whether it would be enforceable. Because if the court can interfere in the quantum of the damages, then they can also come back and say that whatever has been defined in the contract is either less or more, and hence I will decide what is the quantum of the contract. So if it's a sole remedy clause, we don't know. We don't know. It has not been tested yet. But still, if it is a plain and simple contract, you know that there is only delay can affect the contractor. It is still better to go with that clause. It's better to. I recommend that such a clause is incorporated into the contract. It can also say, I've seen many contracts where it says, yes, it's X percentage per week of delay, subject to a maximum of Y percentage. And if we cross the Y% during the execution of the contract, the contractor has got right to terminate the contract. This is another addendum to the contract, and which is actually recognized by the courts. So if we have already maxed out on what is liquidated damages, then the contractor can say that since I cannot recover anything more while all the time I am losing, every day that you delay I am losing, I have got the right to terminate the clause, to terminate the contract and find somebody else and recover the cost from you. So that can also happen. The recoverability, even if there is no loss. That is another beauty of liquidated damages clause. It is not required on the part of the contractor to prove that he actually incurred a loss. Now, this is again, I'm talking it from the perspective of common law. Whether it will be applicable in the courts of law of UAE is doubtful because of the concept of actual damages. Now, this is another case, City of Chicago versus Bethlehem Steel. Bethlehem Steel was supposed to deliver and install some steel structures for the City of Chicago for the express highway. They delayed delivery, because of which the project got delayed. However, the project program itself got recovered because of the performance of other contractors, and City of Chicago did not incur any loss. There was no, it got completed in time. But because Bethlehem Steel delayed, the city tried to enforce the penalty because it was in the contract. Bethlehem Steel naturally went ahead and said that no, it has been covered in the, it has been recovered. Maybe we delayed, but you did not incur any loss, any actual loss. It went to the court, and any guesses what happened?
LD allowed.
But
LD allowed.
yeah, it is allowed. It is allowed because there was no requirement to prove loss. Again, would that happen in UAE?
No.
I don't think so, because actual loss is still a significant factor in the court.
So can I add a question to that?
Yeah.
There is an employer who has entered into two different contracts with two parties, and there is a LD clause with each of them.
Yeah.
And completion of both of their works simultaneously will help him So in such, if the delays are there from both the parties there,
Yeah.
will you not be claiming LDs twice from both parties?
He can
So
claim.
in such a case, can one party under the common law go and challenge that?
No, not under common law. Again, the situation would be different under UA law. So perhaps under UA law, under the circumstance that you're talking about, probably would ascertain what the contractor or the employer incurred as a total loss because of the delay and distribute it among the contractors. That's what would happen. But under common law, every one of them will get hit.
Even though it is...
Yes. It's a double whammy as far as the contractors are concerned. You also must have heard of the term demurrage. Normally happens in the case of shipping lines. That is, the containers come into the port, or the aircraft, the cargo aircraft comes into the airport. It stays there. The consignee does not clear the goods, and hence the cargo airliner or the shipping line is not able to take away the containers, because of which the demurrage is levied. Would that be called a liquidated damage? Why not? It is not ex ante. Actually, demurrage is included in the contract. When you get into a freight contract, it's in fine print, very small print, but it is there. The demurrage is part. Demurrage is actually a type of liquidated damage. Where it differs is that it is almost impossible to ascertain it as a pre-estimated loss, because if the containers go back, would the liner have made money? If the containers, because the containers remain in the port, is the liner losing money? All this is very, very difficult to ascertain. And the other important precept in demurrage is that often it is unconscionable also. In most of the contracts, when you say 0.5% per day of delay, it remains flat. There are contracts which has got an escalating penalty, but in demurrage, it is always escalating. It is an aggravated thing. I don't know, for the first 5 days, it would be free of cost. From 5 days to the 12th day, it will be a certain percentage, and after that, it keeps doubling actually. So, often, even if a container remains uncleared for a month, you could almost, in certain cases, it could almost be more than the value of what is inside the container. So, there are many cases where the container remains in the port and the port goes for auction. So, it is a type of liquidated damage. This is another twist to the liquidated damage principle, whether it applies to the entire contract or only delay portion. When we say it is 0.5% of the contract value per day of delay, let us say the supplier was expected to deliver 1,000 boxes for $1,000, and the contract said 0.5% per delay, percentage per day per delay, and subject to a maximum of 10%. Now, he delivered 800 boxes, but 200 boxes were delayed. Would that be applicable? Would the maximum, would you be referring it to only the delayed portion, the contract value to the delayed portion, or is it the total contract value? This is again, it is very, very important to make it very clear in the contract itself, because any amount of lawyering after that will only lead to more litigation. It's very, very important to clear it, and especially if it is a pure supply. I mean, you're just pushing boxes. It is it's advisable to have this clause inserted, a variation to the clause inserted that the applicable damages will be to the delayed portion of the contract. It is advisable. On the other hand, from the contractor's perspective, there are cases where even it might be an insignificant portion of the entire scope that has been delayed, but still, yes, it affects the entire scope of the work, entire project work. In many cases, in many real life cases, in such cases, of course, the contractor is not going to allow that. So it depends on the context again. Milestone delays versus completion. You could again have cases where you take a power plant There could be milestones which says that for delivery, you have to meet, delivery is a milestone, you have to meet this particular date. If it is delayed, I'll start charging you the liquidated damages. Energizing the plant, if you don't meet the date, again that's a milestone, I'll start charging you. Completion and handing over. So there could be about half a dozen milestones during the execution of the project. There is one particular twist to the story. Maybe you delayed on the first and second milestones. The third milestone was the handover. You were able to, even though you delayed on the first and number 1 and number 2 milestones, but you completed the entire contract in time. What would be the case? This again depends on the context. If whatever is your contractual obligation to perform in the contract, if these milestones are of no consequence to the entire, from a point of view of the employer, in what he is going to get out of the project, if it is of no relevance, then again I would recommend that incorporate this into the clause, which says that milestone delays, yes, when I put that invoice, you can detect it. You can detect the 10% or the 0.5%, but when it comes to completion and it's proven that I've completed the entire contract in the completion, give me back the money. It's a good clause to put it in. Substantial completion versus handover. Contractors are very smart. They might say that you have a small portion of the entire project. You're working for a contractor. The contractor again has got a main contractor, and the main contractor is working for the employer. Now, this is between the subcontractor and the contractor. The contractor could say that regardless of whether you complete the work or not, the completion date is when I hand over my work to my contractor, to my customer. Now, this is where it's important to draw the difference between handover and beneficial use. If your customer has attained beneficial use, then it is as good as completed, as good as the scope has been completed. There is no further reason to evidence that whether you have handed over it could be due to a dozen other reasons. So again, this is again I'm talking from the perspective of a subcontractor, where it is important to say that the end user achieving beneficial use is more important than this document called the takeover certificate or the handover certificate or whatever it is called. I've again, in the last 10-15 years that I've been here, I've seen various versions of FIDIC getting, very, very creative versions of FIDIC that gets formed as contracts. Of late, and progressively it has been improving also. They have become more and more reasonable, more and more FIDicized, if you may. And it's becoming, in fact, just a month or so ago, I saw a draft contract coming in from a government company where that was allowed for. A bonus for early completion and a penalty for non-payment to the contractor, which is a remarkable thing. This is something that I said, wow. So things are really improving. And then it could be also, after the liquidity crunch happened, 2007, post-2007, there were a lot of subcontractors who were hit mighty, severely because of non-payment. And contractors and developers use that as an excuse, use the general trend of the economy as an excuse not to pay, to levy liquidated damages, take whatever excuse not to pay. That was a prevalent, and now that it's again the question of the pendulum. The exploiter becoming smarter, and then when the new contractors entered into the marketplace, they have started negotiating better and better contracts. Now those are becoming the standard contracts now, which is a very good evolution of contracting in the UAE. Coming to the end of it, so that's the summary. We went through the evolution of liquidated damages, how penalty, delay penalty, liquidated damages. Liquidated damages, what are the three guidelines, the three principles that govern the precept of liquidated damages. Of course, common law and UAE law is a totally different story. in UAE law, as professionals working in the UAE market, it is better not to be guided or not to be, not to be influenced by what you see from the Western courts, even from the Indian courts. The scenario is different. It is very, very important while drafting the contract on how you're able to word a particular clause in such a way that there is minimum confusion, and the clarity has to come very upfront, very much in advance of the contract negotiations. If you get into a litigation, it can take years and it is detrimental to both parties. It's better to have a LD clause rather than not having it, but make it very, very clear. And of course, we went through some related issues. Sure, you have questions?
So,
I'm not sure. Yeah, sure.
So in common law jurisdiction, though nominated contractor is a nominated subcontractor is a subcontractor.
Yeah.
Will the court view differently if there is a delay by the nominated contractor, resulting in the main contractor being penalized a higher amount than?
I don't know. For the limited purpose of liquidated damages, I don't know whether a nomination or a novation is really going to influence that particular decision. It would still work the same way. I guess so.
Even though the case is that in most nominations, it is forced onto the contractor.
Yes.
And
And I would say, especially because of that, the contractor has got more of a right to enforce penalty on this nominated subcontractor.
yeah, but the penalty with the nominated subcontractor and the contractor, the amounts will be less.
Yeah, correct.
But the contractor in turn will be penalized.
Because okay. The delay caused by the nominated subcontractor,
Yeah.
and hence the contractor has got a.
How will the court view?
I guess it would not influence that factor at all. The contractor would still be expected to perform according to his original obligations.
In this jurisdiction?
I would think so.
See.
I would think so. Yes, sir.
Is there a cap on the UAE law for the penalty and liquidated damages?
No, it's a contractual limit that you would put. The law itself does not state anything. The law doesn't say that it's 10% because it's very difficult. Yeah,
What is the logic, when people say that it's a 10% of the contract value?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no logic. Say, for example, if it's a 1-year project, like you delay for 100 days, or maybe for 3 months project,
I agree with you. There have been cases. I had one contract where we maxed out on the liquidated damage clause in 10 days. Because the per day limit was so high, we maxed it out in 10 days. It was 1% per day delay because it's so critical. We maxed it out in 10 days. After that, the contractor had to resort to other remedies. So it could be, like I said, it could be termination of the contract. It could be another punitive clause that can be there, in the sense that he can say that now pay me for the loss of revenues. And all that is applicable under UAE law, but not under common law. If it is maximum has been defined, that's fine.
Even after the maximum is taken from the penalty, he can also invoke the guarantee, performance guarantee.
No, the performance guarantee is for non-performance. Yeah, but the performance guarantee, the pulling of the performance guarantee, the drawing down of the performance guarantee is in effect the penalty, is in effect the application of the penalty. It is a device for collection of the money rather than an additional benefit that is available to the contractor. If it's a 10% performance bond and he has got no more money to be paid to the subcontractor, then he doesn't have any other hold. In that case, he can draw down on the performance guarantee. I don't think it is going to influence. It's a 10% plus 10%, facility that is available to the contractor. Definitely.
We see many contracts here using liquidated damages, penalties, but in the context of courts can interfere and in the quantum of the damages. So,
Yeah.
which is the preferred terminology, like penalty or liquidated damages?
It's better to use liquidated damages.
Limits, yes.
To remove all the.
Both are allowed in this jurisdiction. It's unlike in other common law jurisdictions.
Yeah, I mean, in other laws, penalty,
Not allowed.
The contractor would certainly not allow
Yes.
the word penalty to be introduced. But even here, I would advocate using the word liquidated damages, because if it, let us say, I represent an MNC. If I have to take the jurisdiction out of UAE and go into another jurisdiction, then I can use the convenience or the guidelines of that. Not only that, under a penalty, even from a contractor's point of view, he has to evidence and substantiate the actual losses. But whereas under liquidated damages, he doesn't have the.
It's a pre-estimate.
Yeah.
Can I have?
Sure.
You mentioned that Article 392 for the code
Yeah.
adjusting the liquidated damages. Here, most of the disputes goes to the arbitration tribunals.
Yeah.
So, what is the guideline there for the arbitrator? Whether he has to acknowledge the contract or he has to look at the UAE code and adjust the damages based on the 392?
See, why does a case or a dispute go to a court of law? Is where there is a dispute over the facts. There is not a dispute over the legislation or the dispute of the interpretation. If it's a dispute over the facts, it goes into the arbitration. If it is a dispute over the or the applicability of the law, it has to go to the court. Having said that, the IFC has now set up its own arbitration court. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it's pretty effective now also. There are many contracted cases which are going into the DIFC arbitration tribunal, and you'll be interested to know that they do take common law into account.
Yes, it's a common law jurisdiction.
It's a common law jurisdiction, and they would apply the common law principles of liquidated damages rather than anything else. But the aggrieved party, let us say in this arbitration, if the contractor doesn't get what he wanted or what he expected, he would go to the court. So, why do we go into arbitration is to avoid the litigation and the long period. But then if the other party is willing to take it. But to answer your question, the arbitration tribunal would take the fact of the contract into account. That would have more significance than the 392.
The onus is on the contractor to prove the actual damages were less, isn't it? When it goes to the court.
In this case, who are you calling as a contractor? The employer?
No.
The
contractor and the employer.
Okay. In that case, the contractor has got the onus to prove yes. If the employer has levied damages and the contractor thinks that it's too much, it's the onus. He would become the complainant.
Gentlemen,
Last question.
Okay. In one of the slides, it was mentioned that in case the liquidated damages are, or the liquidated damages can be assessed in a precise way, then it may be difficult to for this liquidated damages to be enforced. Why should be that? In one of the slides, it was mentioned that if the damages, delayed damages can be assessed precisely, then the liquidated damages clause is difficult to enforce.
It's not a pre-estimated.
Yeah, but
If it is not a pre-estimated, damage.
No, it was stated that if the liquidated damages can be assessed precisely, then the liquidated damage cannot be enforced. This was mentioned in one of
So, the second point.
Yeah, it's like to guidelines to enforce qualifies as enforceable. So it's saying that the very harm cause will be incapable or very difficult of accurate estimation.
Yeah, that's one of the guidelines for the enforceability of an LD clause. I still don't get where you're coming from.
No, it says that harm caused, it means that liquidated damages is enforceable. It means it is enforceable if it is not possible to accurately estimate.
Correct.
But if it is possible to accurately estimate the damages and that is being put as liquidated damages, so why should
Then it's called actual damages.
No, that's fine. But suppose in the contract this has been put as liquidated damages. There is no and that liquidated damages is absolutely precise estimate of the damages what the employer is going to incur, and he has put this term as liquidated damages.
Yeah.
Are you saying that is not enforceable?
No, we are not trying to say that. To be
Silence, please.
You could enforce that under any other means of the contract. You could say that 25,000 dirhams per day is a value that is the ascertained value, because time is of the essence. Is the ascertained value for the employer, and 25,000 dirhams will be taken away as from the contract value. You can state that and it would still be enforceable. What I'm trying to say here is that to be enforceable as a liquidated damage clause, where you don't have to prove penalty, where you don't have to prove loss, then there should be a preemptive assumption that it cannot be estimated.
One class.
Yeah.
With regards to this UAE law, is there any maximum cap on liquidated damages? I mean to say, like you said, there is no ex ante principle. The court may interfere and it can adjust the liquidated damages and all. Like for example, if there is no ex ante, if I only introduce LD clause in the contract and does not mention any amount,
Yeah.
and at a later stage there are delays and all, and if at that time if I estimate my loss, and if it comes more than what the subcontractor would get,
Value.
then what?
Yeah, it is a difficult position, and you know, by default, it is very advisable not to define that limit for both parties. Again under common law, for limitation of liability, not necessarily as liquidated damages or anything. For limitation of liability, the common law says that it cannot exceed the contract value itself. You can recover up to a subject to the limit of 100% of the contract value. But again, UAE civil law doesn't talk anything about limitation of liability. So it can be infinite. Whatever, I mean, in some cases it can be pretty drastic. And the subcontractor is not capable to pay, then the contractor has to look for other means to recover. It is a difficult.
Thank you very much. It was one of the most, I would say,
That's a lie.
exhaustive description of a small item which we normally ignore and we don't give so much importance. But the way you elaborated, and many of us will remember next time while drafting contract or accepting contract what to do. Johnson to give a small memento to our speaker.
Thank you very much.
We have been publishing and we have been trying to give membership cards for the last 1 year. And finally, I am glad to announce that we have made the cards. So you'll be proud to keep it. And I'm sure as you have shown in the strength that you value the institution, and this card will add that value. So I would like to give some 5 cards to the initial numbering is based only on alphabetic, and we have published around 118 cards, so I cannot give everyone. So I invite our President, Mr. Varghese, to come over, please. So the first member to receive the card is Abdul Wahab.
I just want to add 2 words actually. Today is a dream come to reality actually. We were dreaming actually this for many years. And issuing a card for IAQS member is a great privilege for each one of us today. And it's honor and privilege again for us to have a speaker like Mr. Nawaz today here. And it's no wonder actually how employers after the credit crunch employ chartered accountant to manage their project or their companies. I think recently we started reading FIDIC and contract. Thank you so much, Mr. Shah.
Thank you.
I would like to say a few words about IQS. I think I'm a very lucky person to be selected the first one, and I'm also proud to be a part of member of IQS. Since I'm from a mechanical background, I was just wondering from where can I get the right guidelines and right information to pursue MREX. But now thanks to IQS and thanks that we have got a platform, it's very encouraging for us to pursue this MREX and also especially the CPD events. It has been very encouraging and it's very important.
The next is Abdullah. Mr. Abdullah.
Good evening, everyone. I am a new member of the IAQS. I just started involving with the IAQS for the last 3 months only. The reason for coming here was to get MRICS. But before getting the MRICS, I got the MIQS. I value this one more than MRICS. Within the 3 months here, I have improved a lot in all aspects. Thank you very much.
Aditya Shah.
I've been just a member since last about a month's time. Thanks to Ramesh and Franklin, they put me into it and now I'm getting more into it. And for all the support that you guys have given me, thanks a lot.
Ajmal Abu Bakr.
I'm very thanks to IAQS to give us this platform to to increase our calibers and to thank you.
We would like now to give to our lady members, Chandrani Auchar.
I will just say thanks to all and special thanks to the IAQS because I was here. I think I joined this group last 2.5 years, but actively involved in this year because of getting the RSS. And I will say thank you to the Ramesh and thank you to all the board members for support and hope in future will do more and more. Thanks a lot.
I would like to thank each and everyone, especially the members who are conducting the classes, dedicating the time, valuable time for encouraging all other candidates to come into this platform and acquire the RICS. This is very good because I started with this in 2008, just to start with. At that time there were no classes, nothing was there, so I was not able to continue at that time. Now the classes are encouraging me to take that MRICS within a short time. So this is very much encouraging. Thank you very much.
Sajina.
Yeah, I'm very glad to be a member of IAQS. The works of IAQS are more appreciable, very hardworking, and since I've already mentioned about it, the CPDs and the hard work of the mentors is very appreciable, and I wish MIQ also be recognized as MRICS. Okay.
It's a great service and great support given by the team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like Mr. Varghese to introduce our new membership development manager.
And this member, you must have seen an email sent out about 2 weeks before introducing our membership manager. And this member is with us for many years, but recently, maybe for a couple of years, you must have seen her working diligently for IAQS without any reward. She is coming and attending the members, and information was given by her and taken a great initiative, an absolutely great initiative, and no one told her to do it. We don't know whether her husband was an instrumental for her doing this. But we realized that her service could really make a difference. We requested her whether she can be part of IAQS on a part-time basis, and she was more than happy to accept our request. Accordingly, I have great happiness today to announce that the first employee of IAQS on a part-time basis has joined our group, and she is none other than Rekha Ramesh. I welcome Rekha. Maybe for next 3 months.
I'm going to support IAQS.
Okay.
And I'm going to support all the members, whatever their queries are. I'm trying to solve those queries, and I'm trying to answer those queries. And I'm going to try support all of you.
Thank you.
Responding to all membership queries and registration process, and for basically formalizing the registration and membership for the time being. But she will probably take a more active role in coming months, and we will let you know on that process. And thank you so much, Rekha, for accepting our offer.
Thank you.
And you all can collect the CPD event certificate from Paul and the team behind. And let me introduce one person who I know for many years, and he is leading another institution. And he will, his current position, I believe, Mr. Philip Taragan, his current position with the CCE. And Philip Taragan is very energetic and a person who can really, drive things forward. And that's example is now, I think, he's taken a great initiative with the CCE, and that anybody who is associated with CCE knows without an introduction Mr. Philip. We welcome for this event, and thank you for coming, Philip.
I seen this one very exciting. Very, very exciting, very energetic. But now I was thinking every board, where is all my members went? Now I look here, 60% of the members were our members. So I appreciate, especially Mr. Ramesh. And our one-day event in Abu Dhabi on Saturday, we had a guest from you, Mr. Basavaraj, and we given him an opportunity to speak about IAQS. And majority of the members were so keen to know. I think you are not so active in Abu Dhabi.
No, we are going
We are started.
Okay, but many members were keen into joining IAQS, and we will continue this relation.
Thank you so much.
Finally, I request you to collect your membership cards, and as I inform you, we are going to launch a magazine. So please support us by giving some advertisements. Okay, thank you.